Well, joining me now to discuss this and the rest of the day's big stories is National Affairs Editor of the Daily Telegraph and one-third of The Outsiders, James Morrow. James, great to see you. Look, this is the first time we've heard the Prime Minister concede that the Yes campaign could be doing better, isn't doing enough. And he's also indicated that he wants quite a short campaign, perhaps because he knows that the longer he leaves it, the more support for the Voice drops.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of calculations here, Sharri, and it's great to be here as well with you. And I'll tell you what, I was fascinated listening to his response to Tony Abbott there. You know, and he's been saying this over and over again. He's been using these words about negativity and relentless negativity, and it sounds almost like he's channeling Julia Gillard back, you know, from, remember, 12 years ago, and she would be saying exactly the same thing about Tony Abbott. So it seems like, you know, there's this leitmotif in Labour politics at the moment that they're just going back to this idea of negative versus positive. I don't think that's going to work for them. The problem, Sharri, everything you said about cost of living and being out of touch, and this doesn't affect people's grocery bills or anything else in the power bills, that's all true. But the problem is, from the very start, this referendum was a middle of an election term referendum without bipartisan support. History shows that that sort of referendum basically is always destined to failure. You couple that with all the problems you mentioned and the real trickiness over the model and the refusal to talk about what that's going to look like, and, you know, the fact that it's part of this whole Uluru Statement, which allows all sorts of other things, you know, potentials for reparations, other activist activity. People are just saying, no, I'm sorry, you know, we'll vote for the recognition of the Constitution. And you notice that's what they talk about now. They don't talk about the voice. But this voice, people do not want a bar of it. The calculation for a short campaign, Sharri, is to say, let's just get it done so there's enough lead time between that failure and the next election.
I mean, it's like I said, it's a bit of a catch-22, because the more people hear Albanese and Linda Burney talk about it, kind of the more turned off they become. But at the same time, the Yes campaign has to mount a campaign, and we're hearing that it's going to be, you know, the spending on it is going to be much larger than the No campaign, so they're going to have quite a big war chest. Now, James, I want to talk to you about another big story. Look, we heard last week that Andrew Twiggy Forrest, the chairman of Fortescue Metals, separated from his wife after 31 years, and that was that. But now it's been revealed by the Australian Financial Review that Twiggy Forrest was the subject of a secret in-house probe into whether or not he had a relationship with an employee of the mining company, whether or not that was inappropriate. He has been cleared of wrongdoing by the board. My understanding is he denies any relationship. But James, the revelation of the investigation in the Fin Review today is fascinating. How are these revelations by the Fin, because they've broken all of these stories, impacting on Twiggy's very carefully curated image? We know he loves publicity. He loves to, you know, present a very carefully curated green image of helping to solve the planet.
Yeah, well, I mean, sure, look, and you got to sort of separate a few of these things, so to speak. I mean, you know, it's very sad that his marriage has dissolved. I don't want to wish that on anybody. It's a terrible thing. And, you know, we wish him and his ex-wife well on all of that. Sure. But that said, you know, this adds a whole nother element to it. But frankly, I think, you know, Twiggy Forrest is one of those things. He's almost a little bit like The Voice. People have made their mind up one way or the other on this guy already before these revelations. And the things that I'm thinking about are, you know, a lot of his green activities and what I think a lot of people perceive are hypocrisies around, you know, that and rent seeking and trying to, you know, make a lot of money off of subsidies and that sort of thing. And then also a lot of his comments around China, to be frank, you know, and about China not being a threat to Australia and things like that. People have a lot of concerns about that sort of thing. So I think, you know, personally, for myself, my concerns are more around where he acts in the public policy space, in the energy space, and the diplomacy space, than where he is, you know, in his private life.
Well, I'm sure there'll be more reports from the Fin over the coming weeks. Now, I want to turn to Dr. Charlie Teo. He's a very controversial surgeon. A tribunal, as you know, last week ruled that he can only perform his brand of high-risk, high-reward operations if he gets written permission from another experienced neurosurgeon. But the Herald on the weekend ran a fascinating article. They had an interview with the family of a woman called Ellie Middleton, and she'd suffered catastrophic brain injuries after Teo's operation. She now requires 24-hour care. She's wheelchair bound. Ellie's devastated family spoke out about, the impact that his surgery, his bungled surgery, has had on their lives, and they said that Ellie now has no quality of life. But Dr. Teo appeared in a television interview last night, and he had a different take on all of this. He seemed to say that racism was playing a role. Have a look.
Why would they hate you?
Well, we've been asking that question ever since the get-go, and I'm sure that my personality doesn't help. Being Asian may not help. 11,000 operations, 2 complaints. I understand many of the attitudes of other surgeons against me. Take one, for example, where someone calls the tumour inoperable. They come to me, I say it's operable, I take it out, everything goes well. I can understand why that surgeon doesn't like me, because it's made him look like an idiot.
I mean, James, everyone has their own opinion, and there's a lot of people whose lives have been saved by Charlie Teo, but then you also have families who can't even get hold of him after he's bungled an operation on a loved one.
Well, look, I mean, the thing with a guy like Charlie Teo, he's a maverick, and I'm willing to cut mavericks a lot of slack. But, I got to say, it's that bit about playing the race card there that I found pretty offensive, given that we have a lot of people of all sorts of ethnic backgrounds in our hospital system, and they're wonderful surgeons and doctors and caregivers, and they never have to play that card. And I think that really cheapens, I think, what is an important debate to be had about medicine and risk and reward and all of that.
Yeah. All right, James Morrow, thank you very much for the news update today.